Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to some of you, and peace out to the rest of you. Blackheart, signing black in again, asking you to hit that share button. The message is more important than the messenger. So if you've hit like or subscribe, thank you, but extra thanks if you have hit the share button. Stephen Clinkscales with the channel StephisCold explained the pitfalls of just being yourself. He was right about the pitfalls. The question is, which self are you being? You can change yourself naturally to a different version of what would still be you by knowledge and by practice of habits. Decisions. You can be your better self or your worse self, your better informed self or your most ignorant self. That can be good and it can be bad because we're made of both. But the question that has to be asked is why women tell this to younger men and boys. Just be yourself, and she's coming along. And the answer is simple. She does not want to deal with the difficulty of telling a man what she wants, despite her ability to talk forever about everything else in life, especially when it bores or irritates the hell out of men. By masking what she wants, by masking what women want, a woman will turn out a man that won't know what it is. And if all of the women do this, then they will all turn up and raise boys into men that will not know what it is, what do they want. And then they will become good for the non-sexual things that women want. This serves an interest for them collectively. Several guys who will change her tires is an advantage to her. She doesn't have to change it, and she doesn't have to pay full price for a tire change. You get the idea. The other thing is she can feel special when a guy is what she wants, while she knows that men don't know what women want. So she can feel like this guy that happened to be what she wants just naturally was that way. She's too dumb to realize that it steps up the competition for her to get him. Or she doesn't care. Or she actually wants the competition and demands it. Either one, we cannot logically justify. That tendency to not tell men what they want, but to even go so far as to lie to a young boy in the family and tell him to just be himself without telling him to be the better version of himself, shows us that this is actually a gender war that has been going on since before electronic technology. They've been in on this from jump, and they didn't have to have a conversation about it. Probably for as long as there has been spoken language, which to me would be from the time of Adam. And this may mean that Eve didn't have to think about what it is that women want, but maybe 2 or 3 generations after her, the mothers quit telling the sons what it was that women wanted, and they kept this thing going ever since then. The point is, this goes back further than we could possibly trace, and they've been in on it, and they don't have to take a class or all have a meeting about it. This is something that they understand at a subconscious level without thinking about it. In other words, they can do this without intention, let alone malice. One motive is shyness. The best that a shy woman can do is to remain silent. If she's going to obey the shyness and she's not going to fight it, then the best thing for her to do is to simply remain silent and just not say anything about it. But the worst that they can do is what we're seeing in the West, and that is to outright lie and say these dumb things. I'll never forget when I was in the Spanish language chat room before I became Muslim. And I was practicing Spanish because I was looking for jobs, but in order to make it known that Spanish was my second language and that I was not trying to pass myself off as a Latino, I took the screen name El Africano, which means the African. Some of the men came up and started asking questions like, are you well endowed? And I told them, well, I'm not supposed to sit up and describe myself like that. And you're a guy, why would you ask the question? Well, I need to know what kind of competition I got dealing with the women in here. Oh, well, don't worry, I don't speak Spanish fluently. So I can't compete with you. Not in that regard. Well, you may not have to if you're African and you're well endowed. I mean, someone will say this. I'm saying this to say that one of the things that happened was that one man came in, he jumped in this conversation, and he said, guys, he has an advantage and you have an advantage. That's all. And I've been with all kinds of women. I've dated supermodels. And I'm telling you, the important thing is to just be yourself. I'm telling you this from experience. And I said to him, it is true that you have to be yourself because they can pick up fake. But what you did not explain is that we have to be the better versions of ourselves. Because just being yourself by itself won't work. Now, I understood this even back then. He said that, yeah, not everybody's going to like every man. But he didn't want me to tell these guys that his advice wasn't going to work. That most women will not like most men. That it is just naturally difficult for men to pair up. It ain't difficult for women. It's difficult for men. It becomes difficult for women when they hit a certain age or after they've gotten so used to driving men away. It becomes difficult for women only to compete with each other for the same few men. It doesn't become difficult for them to find men. It doesn't become difficult for them to find decent men until they get older and they've got these high body counts. And even then, there are men that don't really look at age as a bad thing. They do exist. They're rare, but they do exist. But there are these women they have to deal with this stuff. They got to deal with the consequences in later ages, late 20s to early 30s of what they chose. And then they begin to see the difficulty. And even then, they manage to make it sound like it's men's fault. And this is why I look at them and I simply can't feel a lot of sympathy for what they have to go through. Unless, of course, you get one that, she married while she was young and she was trying to find the right guy and he turned out to be a douchebag. And that's really the only way I can feel some sort of sympathy. And when I say douchebag, what white folks call, I'm pretty much talking about irresponsible and abusive. Just abusive is bad enough. But outside of that, when they go through their 20s, they've been dating, they've been doing all this stuff in college, and they rack up body counts higher than almost any man could rack up, with the exception of the few men with whom they racked up the body counts the only ones that have higher body counts than women. This is when I start looking at them and I start saying, I can't sympathize with you in what you've got to go through. I'm not capable of that. You messed up. You made your decision. You decided to run away from pretty much normal men. You were the one that let them socialize you to where you would find normal and decent men to be unattractive like they were at the bottom of the barrel. To where you were the one that let someone come along and convince you that if they're not one of these 14 out of 10 guys that all the women want, then they're actually the same thing as an incel. And the stereotype of the incel, big, fat, pasty, milk toast, living in the basement of his parents' house, eating Cheetos and playing video games all day. That it was one or the other. This is the mind that easily gets brainwashed to assess us this way, is the same mind that tells their own son and nephew and grandson, just be yourself. When you examine that right there, you understand why the juice is not worth the squeeze. First, be yourself is necessary, but just being yourself is insufficient. When you come to understand that, being yourself is necessary because they're so sensitive to any sort of faking of anything. They'll see faking and counterfeiting even when something is real. They're so sensitive to that because they're faking. So they're assuming that you're like that. But yet and still, just being yourself, well, that's just insufficient. You come to understand that. You realize that there was a reason that in some really old and ignorant cultures, the men did not even take into account the woman's preferences when assigning her a husband. Only the man's preferences mattered. You come to realize what the reason was for it. I don't think that women should be stuck with the men that they find unattractive only. However, you begin to realize why there were cultures that did not give a rat's behind about it. Why only the man could call a marriage off before it happened. You come to understand why it is that the man that wanted to get married and her father made the decision and her decision didn't make any difference. You come to understand what the reason is. Because they can't choose without guidance. Can they choose? Yes. I think they should be allowed to, but they can't choose without guidance. I wouldn't go back to that way. I'd rather see them have a choice and the father have a choice. But if it came down to a choice between her choice and no one else's, or dad's choice and not hers, I would still rather see her make the choice and no one else have any say in it, because we want to see them go through the consequences of their selection, and that is what we're living in now. She has the choice. She has the say-so. If the man looking to marry agrees and she agrees, then they marry, or even they just date, or they just hook up, take the pick. But the point is that she gets to choose independently of any male relatives. We're seeing the consequences. This, what they're going through now, is the consequence. And that advice, just be yourself, is probably the single worst advice that they have ever given to males. But what's worse than that is men, we have us passing this on to each other thinking this stuff works. No, if you're one of those guys that has done that and it has worked for you, you have to understand that you were just lucky. That's it. You've got to understand that you were just fortunate. And I don't even think that that's something you can't just fall up the stairs. So I just don't see that that's the case. I don't see that that can be the case. If you are a man and you're going around and you're telling this advice to other guys, you got to stop and think, what version of himself does he have to be? You got to stop and ask yourself what it is that you don't tell women early on so that you have a chance with them. Do they hide the same things from you, or do they hide different things from you so that they have a chance with you? You got to stop and ask yourself that. And one of the things I would say is that when men are failing, and there's somebody that seems to do okay, don't have him judge your rap. If you're one of those men that succeeds, don't look at a guy making approaches and then judge his approach. Because remember, there's no right way to approach a woman. Remember that there are wrong ways, but there's no right way. Don't act like there's some right way, because you can't describe it. What you do is you watch, you tell him some do's and don'ts that are helpful, the main ones, just a few. Give him about 3 do's, give him 3 don'ts. Have him make the approach, and watch how the women react differently to those same things in this man than how they react to these same things coming from you. And then you will actually learn something about women you don't know, because the men in an environment like this, where they lie, and only very few men wind up being what they want, the women actually still are not known, because the men who succeed don't understand how it is that other men don't. And they don't understand it because, again, both sides fail to understand that the confusion men have about women, and the reason that so few succeed with most of the women, is because the women lied, not because the men are stupid, not because the men are lame, or because the men are weak, but because the women lied. I myself went around years thinking that, okay, well, I'm not lame and I ain't weak, so I must just not understand them. I must just be confused. Took me years to come to realize that no, the average one will lie. The one behind the cash register will lie about this, even though she's polite to you in that business transaction. And she may not even, I'm not saying she's an evil person, but when it comes to this, she will lie before she tells you what it is that they really want and what they can't resist. The other one, could even be your mail lady, lying. Not about everything in life, but about that. You may know somebody at the job who she's a very serious practicing Christian, and she's impressive because she doesn't lie and she doesn't have any secrets to keep, till you start asking about what women want. Oh boy, watch them lies come out. Or she just won't tell you. But spilling the secrets, confessing, and doing such in a way that you know it's true because it will explain your confusion. No, that's not coming forth even from her. And that's why I didn't trip when I heard that women can't preach in church. I didn't take issue with it for that reason. It wasn't because I hate them. It was because, see, now I come to understand that when it comes to one of the most important things, if a man wants to have a legacy and a family, one of the most important things that man needs to know, he cannot learn from her. Men have a better chance, and I want women to stop telling men, you need to learn about women from women. Why don't you let us talk? Well, because you've had all of human history to talk and just spill the goddamn beans. And what we're finding out through studies and every other way but you confessing is what you want. And we're finding out it's nasty. We're finding out it's duplicitous and scandalous, and it's stuff you would never tolerate from men. That's what we're finding out. The only question now is, are you socialized this way or are you naturally this way? So men, don't let these ladies come along and tell you, well, you need to learn about us from us. You continue, if you're going to try to learn about women, you learn about them from the men that the women are running after. And even then, there's only so much they can tell you, because since the women did not come out and tell them what they wanted, they just rather chased after these guys that had it. These men may really not even fully be aware of what it is that they've got. They may really not understand. Now, the men who have failed and succeeded, even then, there's not a guarantee that they'll know. Even then. Because, I mean, let's just take C. Bookie, for instance. He has admitted that he had to build himself up into the guy that they want. He's admitted this. He has not lied about that. But one of the things he has done is that he has said, he has encouraged men to work on themselves, which is not necessarily wrong, but I've never heard him go in on the women and say men would know this at a younger age if you were more honest. I've not heard this. And you and I know from what I've already said, because men who succeed with women and men who fail have observed one thing: women can talk forever, more than I can. I got a YouTube channel. They can out-talk me. They just can't talk about this important thing that affects the quality of their lives and your lives the most. That they cannot do. They can talk about shopping. They can talk about romantic comedies. They can talk about storylines of movies that we didn't even know were ever made. They can talk about the lives of celebrities, but they can't tell the damn truth about why they're with one and why another one will never have a chance no matter what he does. Now, I'm not saying they're wrong because they got a preference. I'm saying that they can't tell you the truth about what that preference really is. And the worst lie they've ever told is, just be yourself. Even when they say be the best version of yourself, they act like the morally best version of yourself is what they mean. They let you assume that. And what they really mean is you have to be as close to Superman physically as possible. And they don't tell you that because they know goddamn well it's unrealistic, and you would know that. Because remember, you, I, and they all know that even in the storyline, Superman had to be super just to qualify for Lois Lane. And he bet not look at Wonder Woman. You and I understand that. I'm hoping that what I've said one day will no longer be true. In the meantime, I hope it's a benefit. Blackheart signing, black out. Assalamu alaikum.